when you have an audience that's paying attention to you, like you're sitting on a gold mine. Like attention is currency.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. This is the podcast where we cover growing and monetizing a fan base and building a music career with marketing strategies that are working right now based on what we see every single day inside our music marketing agency, IndieX, and across our community of thousands of artists and bands. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. This is episode 397, and I'm here today to talk to you about the unfair advantage that you have as an artist. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy, and with me, as always, for this riveting topic is Circa. Cirque, what's up, dude?
What's up, gang?
How's it going, man?
It's going good. I'm super psyched. Super psyched for another pod, dude.
Me too, man. This is going to be a fun episode, maybe a little philosophical, maybe a little motivational, and also maybe a little bit tactical as well as we get into. We wanted to talk about, a little bit of a rundown on our thoughts, feelings, and experiences of artists and the unique advantages they have when it comes to business compared to other types of businesses out there, any types of businesses. And we've talked about this. I think it's been like the sprinkling on the cake of so many episodes over many, many years now. I can't believe that this is episode 397, but we've certainly talked about this and kind of painted with broad strokes about it in other episodes where we've touched on it as it relates to marketing and things like that. But we wanted to go a little bit deeper today and really just give a bit of our experience and a bit of the sort of depth of meaning to what we're talking about when we say that artists have a big advantage compared to a lot of other kinds of businesses, and hopefully give you guys that as a bit of motivation to go forward and crush the rest of your week when it comes to growing your audience, building your music career, and all the good stuff that comes with it.
Let's do it.
It's been a minute since you and I have talked about this, and I'm hoping that this will be like a candid kind of episode exploring both of our ideas and see where they converge and where they separate. There's a few things that come to my mind when I think about the unique advantages that artists have and why they have one. And the first that separates them from, like so many businesses out there, like you can think about businesses in your town, in your city. You can think about businesses online that this specific advantage applies to. But when you're an artist, especially an artist that has grown a bit, you have a captive audience. And there's something to be said to that a lot of businesses don't have. You have people who are already paying attention to you. If you've grown a fan base, you have an audience that you've earned their attention. Now, you have to hold their attention still. But compared to a lot of other businesses who have to continually earn attention over and over again with their marketing messages and the offers that they're making, artists stand out in some ways. I think that they've earned attention and holding it is the next thing they need to do, but they're still at an advantage. And I think that this is not spoken about enough, that like when you have an audience that's paying attention to you, like you're sitting on a gold mine. Like attention is currency in a lot of ways,
Yeah, I think there's like two. This is kind of our founding thesis was like, well, you have the disadvantage of, you have a couple of disadvantages, one of which is like, there is no presupposition of transaction, where like, if you're a fan of a business, you're paying that business.
Right.
That's how you two interact. If you're a fan of an artist, like it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that you're transacting with that artist.
True. Yeah.
So that's like a strike against you. And we posited early on in the company that like, well, that's made up for by the fact that you enjoy much greater customer loyalty. So you have a marketing challenge in that you're not really providing a solution to a problem. It makes it harder to market, harder to call out your target demo, harder to advertise. Like a lot of things are harder, but once you get a fan, they're going to stick around for a lot longer. They're a lot more loyal. You don't have direct competition in the way a business does. So they're like, we assume it's like a no trade-off. I don't know how convinced I am anymore that that's the case. And I think like one of the X factors here is that like artists are just really, pardon the phrase, dog shit at asserting their own value.
Yeah.
Like artists are really bad. First of all, artists are bad at commerce and like economics and capitalism. They're just very de facto Marxist to a degree. I think most artists are like just super Marxist, or we come from, you know, just more anti-corporate, anti-capitalist leanings philosophically.
Well, that foundation of an assumed transactionless relationship between you and your customers definitely doesn't help that default state.
Yeah, totally. And we're also idealists, which means that we think that if it doesn't sound fair that something should be the case, then it actually isn't the case.
Yeah.
Like we literally assert the ideal over reality. So we're delusional in a certain sense.
This was supposed to be about unfair advantages, dude.
Well, we might as well steel man the case that there are no advantages. We should get all of our sort of dirty laundry out in the open before we make that case.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like we're just bad at commerce. Now that's not to say that like we have to be. We just kind of generally are. That's the general observation on my part, is that like artists are unwilling to assert their value, unwilling to charge for products or offer products in the first place, unwilling to, when charging for products, charge like prices that allow them to function as a business, and also have the artists box themselves in with what they're allowed to offer. They think they have to go on like super expensive tours. They think that the only way that they can make money off of their actual recordings is through Spotify, which is a terrible like way to recoup and monetize. So there's a lot psychologically that artists put against themselves. They basically like place themselves in a pool of quicksand.
Yeah.
At the outset. Not that this needs to happen. This just is what tends to happen.
Yeah.
But it can totally be the opposite. And there are many cases where it is the opposite, where artists have been able to assert their value, charge for things, it's quite obvious now that the greatest margins to be had as an influencer of any sort, content creator of any sort, is through direct merchandising. You're creating your own products and offering them to your audience. And we know that's the case because advertisers are willing to pay content creators for ad space. And if they weren't making way more off of selling the things to the audience, they wouldn't pay for the ad space.
Yeah.
So you just know the margins are there.
Right. So what that means to you is cut out the middleman and sell your own products.
Yes. And so to the degree that artists are willing to do that, and they do, there is an advantage. It just tends to be the case that artists aren't willing to do that, and they won't.
Yeah. And that ties back to the captive audience advantage, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that's like a proof point to the captive audience advantage, is you have a captive audience that other advertisers are like little sharks hopping in your water, being like, oh, if they're not going to advertise to their audience and try to monetize it, I'm going to hop in this pool and do that.
And also, like, it's worth noting that if you let them do that, you're an idiot. You just got robbed, Chief. I'm sorry to say, but if you're a content creator and you're like, I figured out how to captivate an audience of 100,000 people, but there's no way I can figure out how to print t-shirts. Like, you're an idiot, dude. You're dumb. Like, I'm sorry. You are.
Yeah. You know,
Don't mean to be obtuse or like objectionable, but like this is a candid conversation. So let me just say that like
this was about advantages, dude.
I'm not going to hold your hand and tell you you're a special little baby. Like you're a dumb idiot if you do that.
Well, I think pointing out all the default state disadvantages that artists are faced with if they follow the path of least resistance, we'll call it, only highlights how much you can win if you actually see the advantages that you have in front of you and you take advantage of them. Captive audience being a prime great example. Advertisers are willing to pay money to you effectively by buying advertising space on your content to monetize products that they are selling against your audience. And if you're not willing to do the same, but not incur advertising costs in some cases, then someone else is taking your advantage and eating it.
Right. They're not here to make less money.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's one thing that's always struck me as odd is that like people who make like million subscriber YouTube channels are willing to give up tons of their value. So like there's a couple arguments here. So I'm just going to try to like lay out one way, give the arguments against, lay out the objections.
Yeah, I like the direction that this conversation is taking as a whole, where we're talking about an advantage and then we're talking through the default state that really looks like a disadvantage if you don't.
The advantage is an ideal, right?
Yeah.
We're communicating an ideal that's not pragmatic and it's not practical and it's not what actually happens.
Right. But it can be.
So like we were idealistic coming into Entrepreneur, like, oh, well, we see this obvious disparity. And if artists could just get right, then this disparity could be reclaimed and the music industry would be made right again and everyone would be happy. And we faced the pragmatic or the practical reality that makes it so that's not the case. Because, hey, if it were a practical reality, our ideal, then it would be what's going on, which it's not.
We wouldn't have a business. I mean, maybe we would, but
well, we might even have a bigger business.
Yeah, true. Probably would.
So you're a million subscriber YouTuber. You definitely sell ads. You interrupt people's entertainment. So like people pay for YouTube Premium to not see ads and they still see ads because in the middle of it, you're like, and you know what? The thing is all these data brokers and they're like shilling you incognito, which doesn't even fucking work. And so they're lying to you in the middle of their video, which you would prefer they not do. And a lot of people pay for them not to do and they still do it. Okay. And when you're a million subscriber YouTuber and you're letting Incogni pay you whatever, $1,000, $2,000 a vid to shill their product to your audience, you're losing trust with your audience. You're making their experience worse and you are shilling them something that has absolutely nothing to do with your relationship with them. You're accepting this like detriment to your relationship with your audience in return for $2,000. But Incogni's making more than 2,000 off of your shill. Like 100% they are. Otherwise, they wouldn't be advertising on your videos for so long. So despite the fact that you are making your relationship with your audience worse, it works enough that Incogni makes money. Okay, cool. So clearly then, what would be preferable? It would be preferable if you were shilling to your audience, because then at least it's genuine and it's based off the relationship you've already established instead of cashing in on the relationship you've already established with some third party, which indicates, hey, I've done zero research. I don't even know what the fucking Cogni does. I'm totally willing to sell you to them for $2,000. That's not a very good thing to do with your friends, okay? So like, you're damaging the relationship when you could just be saying like, let me just tell you about what I have to offer and if you want to go buy it. So you could be filling that with your own products. And even if you were like 50% as effective as Incogni, you'd still make your nut. You'd still make your $2,000 per vid. And you would have more control over their experience as a customer of the company that you're shilling because it's your company. And the only thing really standing between you and doing that is one of the first arguments you might hear raised against what I just said, which is, well, I'm not a t-shirt company. I'm a YouTube video creator. And it's like, well, dude, Incogni's not a company removing data brokers, dude. They're liars. So it's like your argument that like, well, this isn't what I'm best at. It's like, hey, that's not what a lot of these companies are best at either. Okay. They're better at marketing, meaning finding dummies like you who are going to accept $2,000 to shill on their YouTube videos. So my overcome of that objection would be, it doesn't need to be your domain of expertise to create merchandise. Some people choose to make it that. There's a great YouTube channel called Oompaville where this kid has been on YouTube for like a decade, has a huge audience, and he built his own candy company because he loves making candy and he shills that instead.
Super cool.
Super cool. And it's like, you can go through that and you could make that one of your primary like abilities. But to give another example, Wendigoon. Wendigoon shills his own t-shirts and stuff. Is he like sick at t-shirt making? Does he make the designs? No, dude, he doesn't. He just struggled through the setup. And now he reaps the benefits. So like, just first of all, like the company that you're offering in place of your own wares is not the best at what they're doing either. And they're not necessarily good for your audience where your own merchandise would be bad. And then two, you just struggle the pain of setup, even if you don't want to go OD into like making this one of your domains of expertise, and you're good. You are now replacing some third party who doesn't care about your customers and fans and doesn't care about your relationship with them and is just trying to like get a check with your own wares where you are accountable to your audience. And if something goes wrong, they can hit you up and you don't suffer like detriment to your audience on some third party's behalf. So it's like so obvious that you should be doing this. It's not even funny.
There's this spectrum of value perception in the music industry where it's a sliding scale between how artists interact with other businesses as their audiences and consumers as their audiences. And the default state for music and the entertainment industry as a whole, we've talked about this before, is that like it's primarily B2B. Like I'm making my money by selling ad space to Incogni, right, on my YouTube channel, instead of where the real value is of I have this audience that is mine, that loves me, that loves the thing that I'm doing, and they support me. The value is right there. It's not on this side of the spectrum, the business to business relationship.
Everything is better about it. There's not even a single axis of analysis by which you could say it's worse. It's so obviously better along every possible spectrum. And so now we're talking about YouTubers, of which like the winners are much more clear from the losers, meaning you could be a middling musician and still be making the same $0 that an absolute dog shit musician is making. You can't really be a middling YouTuber and be making the same money as like a 23 subscriber YouTuber. You're making a little money. Okay. There's a disparity here. So there's like this crushing Pareto distribution in the music industry whereby like if you're in the top 5%, you're making some money. If you're in the top 1%, you're making a lot of money. If you're in the bottom 95%, you make zero money. It costs you money to be a musician. Way different than YouTubers. Okay. So now let's transition over there. As an artist, that doesn't need to be the case. Your strategy directly impacts that economic breakdown I just gave. Now, if you're willing to consider yourself, and we've been advocating for this for a while, just consider yourself to be a content creator. Don't pigeonhole yourself into a musician because it's not really a descriptive term in 2025. There are no pure musicians anymore.
I want to stop for a second there and just go a little bit further on that, because that actually was an interesting point to make that actually tumbles nicely into another advantage that I think artists specifically have, but they don't lean into enough, which it appears that's the overall thesis of this episode is like, there are these advantages if you want them. And this one specifically is, like you just said, Circa, like consider yourself more of a content creator than just a musician or just an artist. And your ability to do that is probably far greater than you realize. And that's what makes you have an advantage, is you are so creative already. You literally pull music from your hands in some instances if you play the guitar, if you're a songwriter. Can you not apply and harness that same creativity for other types of content, for what you do in your marketing, for the way that you interact with your fans, for the things that you sell, for the products you create? You 100% can, and you absolutely should. And that's a huge advantage compared to so many other kinds of businesses out there who don't have the same creativity to harness or haven't spent years and years developing their creative instincts and creative feelings and the stuff that they're passionate about that they love to make. You've got a baseline that you can just channel now. You just have to do it.
Yeah, 100%. And so, yeah, like that's just to say that like it makes sense for you to be to not be relying on third parties, whether you're a YouTuber or a musician. It makes sense for you to not be relying on third parties for your paycheck. You should in-house everything with respect to monetization until you're at a certain level. And that level's like way higher than wherever you're at now. Okay. So don't even worry about it. Like higher. Okay. So I will give a caveat here, a carve out, that there is like, I would say even a majority of the people who are ever going to hear my voice on this podcast episode, you're not yet at the place as an artist where it makes sense for you to even worry about any of these things, because it's just going to take way more work on the attracting an audience side. You're more like the 23 subscriber YouTuber than the 100,000 subscriber YouTuber. Okay. And that's just facts, man. I don't like it. I didn't think that when I came into this company. It just is the case. That's not to say that there isn't an unspoken for middle class of musicians. There absolutely is. And that's generally who ends up being with Indie Pro for a while, is people who like are above that level. If you're not above that level, you spend a year or two trying. And if you don't break out of it, then you just kind of probably will resign from trying to make a real go with the music thing. That's just what's likely to happen. I'm not saying that's what I want to happen. I'm not saying that's what's right. I'm not even saying that's what I expect to happen. That's just what I've observed, is that you can spend a year or two generally going really hard at breaking out of 23 YouTube subscribers towards 100K. If nothing happens in that time, I fully have observed that what most likely is going to happen is that you are going to stop making music, or at least you're going to stop investing so much time and money and effort into it. So let's say you break out of that. Okay, now you're in the territory where it's like, start selling your own products, man. Stop relying on Spotify to give you a check. Stop relying on some ad placement or some sync licensing or even some tour, dude, because a tour is like a horrible way to make money. There are certain bands, certain types of acts for which that's not the case. But I would say by and large, in the era of music we're in now, I fully expect that a majority of the artists that I encounter are not in a band that's going to do well with touring. They're a solo act, or they have a group or something like that, where it's heavily reliant on production. And, like, it's an industry that's unfamiliar with the economics of touring. And so I would say that, like, dude, just seek to monetize through your own wares, your own products. And it doesn't really matter what those products are. There are YouTubers with 100,000 subscribers who are making their whole livelihood nut off of a Patreon and some like t-shirts. And you could be one of those people. And then beyond there, once you start doing that well and you're living off of that, then it makes sense to start to organize around, how do I maximize that? How do I actually make serious money, build a serious business off of this nice little fire that I've sparked, where I can now live off of this money? That's like a great checkpoint. That's like, okay, I'm done with being a lackey at a telemarketing company or a sales company. I'm not going to have to work for that shit anymore. I'm doing what I love.
Is that where you envision all artists sit, as lackeys at telemarketing or sales companies?
Yes, dude. Yeah. Or like whatever, like Walgreens or some shit, right? It was like, once you're beyond that, now you have all the time in the world to actually like, hey, if I want to live stream all day, like, I can do that. I can actually strike up other forms of content creation that bring me a larger audience, some of whom might not even necessarily be there for my music. They might be there for my personality. Who knows? That might be a whole other avenue of fandom that I can start to investigate. But you can start to, like, that's really a fertile place to grow out from. And not limit yourself to a musician, but to limit yourself to, I'm a content creator. I speak to an audience through various artistic mediums, and they identify with me for one reason or another. That could be the content of my songs and its subject matter. That could be my production style, or the way I make music, or my influences and how that comes through in my music. It could be how I talk about the current events of the day in a live stream. Who knows what it is? Okay. I mean, Asmongold was the 7th most Googled term in 2024. And the dude started out making World of Warcraft live streams. Okay. So don't box yourself in at this stage. And especially don't box yourself into like, I just put out records and hope that people listen to them. Like, that really doesn't cut it in 2025. Like that's really not where the opportunity lies. Now you might like, if that's absolutely the only thing you're willing to do, then by all means, forget what I'm saying. But if there's more you're willing to do and more you're interested in, then like you need to explore that. And from there, like it really is like, don't take no shorts, don't take no fronts. If someone's willing to pay you to access your audience, they know something you don't, and you should say no and figure out what they know. That's my
And
opinion. That's my position statement. After being 8 years in this company, that's kind of what I've come to learn, and I think works for people who are willing to take that independent path.
yeah, I 100% agree. And I think once you're at that point, like you said, where you're bringing in revenue, it's paying your bills, the maximization point is really where the advantage of customer loyalty that we talked about at the top of this episode as a creative business, as the trade-off to not being transaction based at the foundation. That's where that starts to pay dividends and really compound on itself, where you have fans that love what you're all about. And like you said, Cirque, they're supporting you for a myriad of different reasons, whether it be the subject matter of your songs, the way you perform, your production value, the content that you're making, the things that you're talking about, the energy that you're bringing to, the daily news or whatever it might be. The personality basis of your business actually becomes an asset at that point that only you have. That only you have.
Yeah. I mean, and especially like we're in an era where we've already peaked in terms of monetization of knowledge work. And we're soon to peak in the monetization of physical labor too. Like we're maybe 10 years out from having seen that peak. And so what do humans pay other humans for anymore? Entertainment. Entertainment goes parabolic. Entertainment becomes the only reason to transact value besides like paying for technology, really. That's my view. It's speculative. It's probably among the more speculative things I've said in this episode. But if it sounds right to you, if it sounds right that we've peaked in knowledge work, that humans are no longer going to be paying other humans for knowledge work, increasingly, it's going to only decrease from here. And you see that like with robotics and AI, like probably physical labor follows suit shortly. Then the only thing that humans can provide uniquely, and especially like you can see in the AI of today, that the things it's exceptionally bad at happen to be entertainment, happen to be knowing or being able to forecast what other humans are going to find funny or entertaining or interesting or emotion provoking. Okay, then like that's your last bastion of value to provide to fellow human beings. And it certainly is like, it's odd right now, I think you would agree, that like among the most well compensated like public figures in the world are now like live streamers. Not just people who create content, but people who create unstructured stream of consciousness content 24/7 in a manner that like cannot be archived and reviewed like a Seinfeld season. You're not going to go through, like, you're not going to discover a streamer today and just go through all their past streams. They're literally paid to be a dancing monkey for you 24/7 on live streams. That's the zeitgeist. That's where we're headed. And so for you to assert yourself in that regime, it doesn't actually matter what your in is. Hassan Piker was like, the Young Turk guy's like little cousin. Asmongold was a World of Warcraft streamer. Destiny was a gamer streamer. Like these people come from, it doesn't matter where they come from. What matters is like where they gain hold and what they do with it. There are all types of musicians who are now streamers as well. And that's becoming more and more the case. Producers are streamers. Producers are YouTube channels. Musicians are YouTube channels. Some of the most well-compensated musicians don't even really put out much unique original music. They're doing like YouTube videos. And so it's like, I'm not saying that's what you have to be. I'm saying that if music is what you start out at, you need to look at how does that scale? How does that expand out to a more general entertainment, role? You are an entertainer, you're an opinioner, you're a public figure, right? You need to start to broaden that horizon. And I think it starts with like, use music as a conduit to get to a place where you are monetizing with an audience. You now have people who would show up for a live stream if you did it. It wouldn't be 0 people attending. Okay, great. Now let's build on that. You got a spark going. Let's build a bonfire, you know? And I think that takes recognizing the regime you're in and the culture and the industry you're in.
I think it's helpful, yeah, to paint these advantages that we talked about, audiences, the emotion based nature of your business and how that's connected to your fans, and the creativity that you have as a musician and how that acts as an advantage. I think it's helpful to paint these into where the direction of the music business, artists, creatives is going. So I love that you touched on that. And you know what's interesting is as you were saying that, I was thinking back to an episode that we did probably 3 years ago, where you were predicting some of this at a slightly different level, probably a little more not reined in, but maybe a little less speculative, and we were definitely not in quite the same AI driven world that we are today. But it's interesting. We'll link to that episode in the show notes actually, because as you were saying all this, I was like, man, this is like a sequel to that conversation that we had like 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that like we've only been vindicated on the merch thing. We started off saying like merch is the underrepresented income source in the music industry. And like people didn't even like your major news sources with respect to the music industry didn't even know we exist. Probably still don't, a lot of them, but definitely didn't acknowledge this point as being something serious that needs to be written about. And they skipped right over admitting we were right to just they're making news articles about how much merch impacts the revenue chain of the music industry.
Yeah.
So like we've only been vindicated on this point. It was a heretic fringe thing to say when we started out. It's now like the mainstream. So like, check, we won that one. Now I think the assertion is only, and this has been the case for years and years, but I'm willing to be stronger about this point, is that like musicians are just, we're now melting all of the creative fields into one, which is like content creator, which like I hate the term too. I wish we could have a better one, but it's like public figure.
Dude, yeah, no, you're 100% right. And I love that. I love that image of melting it all together. And it reminds me of something that I talked about on the podcast a long time ago, where I was talking about like the democratization of pop music and how, you probably remember, we've talked about this plenty of times, like the democratization of pop music, where the styles and sounds and genre bending that started in pop probably in 2015 and on, 2016 and on, where we really started to see like all of these different, you know, usually outside of the mainstream circle, start to find their way into pop. And I think that this is just a continuing expansion of that bubble. Really interesting. Shout out to John Bellion. John Bellion did a lot of that.
Big time. Yeah. Of the ways to get a check in the music industry, the ones where you're not like at the helm of this like company or venture are getting less and less, you know? And so it's just becoming more and more obvious that like the original thesis was correct and perhaps not aggressive enough, because it truly is the case that like not only as a musician should you be offering your own wares and widening the scope of economic activities that you consider as like your business, it's possible that you should place no bounds around the economic activities you're willing to do as a business and no bounds around what you are as a professional. Music is just your in. It's just your into the public figure space.
It's your foot in the door. Yeah. Damn. I love that. I love that, man.
So yeah, these are the things I think about more and more in 2025.
Yeah, me too. Well, I hope this inspires you guys. You have a lot of advantages on your side if you so choose to use them and then expand upon them.
If you're good at anything musically, it's such a leg up. It really is. If the goal is to gather a crowd and then be able to speak to that crowd at length, having a talent that is unique is a huge advantage. Is fishing with dynamite. So if you're good at singing, if you're good at guitar, if you're good at producing, if you're good at songwriting, if you're just good at any particular portion of the music thing, you've got an excuse to gather a crowd. And it's about gathering that crowd in the first step which places you apart from the 28 subscriber YouTube equivalent that we talked about. And then it's about keeping that crowd there and widening it and not being like monotonically linked to the talent that got the initial crowd there in the first place.
That's so good.
Word up.
Go get it, Indies. We'll catch you next time on Creative Juice. Peace out.
Can y'all really feel the peace?